John, it's good to see you in person.
Thank you.
How are you doing? How did you survive getting into London today? All good?
It was hard work, I must admit. The M40 is a great motorway, but, coming across London is nothing like it used to be. We used to, be able to do it in sort of half an hour. Now it's 2 hours to get across London.
I bet. Well, I'm really lucky to have you here. I've been looking forward to this podcast. We're going to be talking about, I would say skincare, but products as a whole, really, when it comes to looking after ourselves and looking after our hands and hair and feet and the lot. And I was going to start this podcast by asking you something that's probably quite important. What drew you into starting a skincare brand? Why did you do it? Talk me through the early
I kind of
time.
fell into it accidentally. My wife was a beauty therapist. She was sort of one of the sort of top salons in Surrey, and she went on a course to this institute, and she came back with products, and I thought these are really interesting because they're really nice, and they smell nice, they're natural, following on from that, I got introduced to the person who formulated them, who was a cosmetic scientist, and this is over 30 years ago. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'll get into making products which are natural, because most of the stuff in the market, even back then, was completely synthetic chemicals and perfumes and petrochemicals. So I met this scientist, and we built up a relationship. She wasn't really a businessy person, so I brought this sort of business astute to her, and we started the factory, and we opened a small factory up in Worcester where she lived. I was living in West London, Surrey area, and I used to travel up there and spend 2 or 3 days. And we created this very small little factory, and we were making things for other people and formulating for other people. And we weren't very big at all. And then we decided to take the leap. We got a sort of small business loan scheme type thing backed by the government, and opened a purpose-built factory. With a brand new unit, and started making things for lots of people and formulating. And a lot of the brands that some of them are not around now because they've been bought out by the big boys, and the big boys closed them down. They were coming to us and saying, well, we know we should be natural, but what's natural? What should we use? What sort of things can we avoid? That back then there was a sort of talk about parabens and breast cancer and things like that. They say, oh, what can we use as a preservative instead of that? So the knowledge that we had was tremendous, and I knew that. And that's what drew me in.
So you were drawn in by the idea of making natural things where they didn't exist before.
Correct. And it's a bit like sort of, comparing EV cars to sort of, petrochemical cars, is the fact that really skincare products and personal care products should be natural. The trouble is they're not easy to make. They're more expensive, and the big boys don't really want to know about it. So they go around and, they try and buy up the small independents, the small naturals, but they then ultimately sometimes even close them down because they just want to get rid of them, and it's small change in their pocket to do that. But when natural products are made, you're bringing something different to the market, and what we know now compared to what we did going back 30 years ago is tremendous. I mean, I've not long come back from the formulation show, and we used to go to these events, and they'd be next to no naturals. Now, of course, there's fantastic natural raw materials that we can work with.
And the formulation show is, for people who don't know?
Formulation show is primarily for manufacturers and formulators. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you go along there to meet people who've found some kind of seaweed from the North Sea, or some kind of plant that's in African country, and they've then processed that natural ingredient, because the thing is, you just can't pull a plant out of the ground and squeeze it. It's got to be processed, and there's more and more of that coming available. It would have been lovely back 30 years ago to have had the naturals that there is available now, because then you could have really went to town with it. But my draw basically was in the fact that I knew so many people who had skin problems, and it was being caused because they were using synthetic chemical shampoos and skincare and all these. I mean, there's something like over 36,000 ingredients that are licensed to be used in personal care products. And there's probably less than 1,000 that are, that are natural. The rest of them are all man-made synthetics. And, you know, man-made synthetics are all very well on a car, but on a human body with cells, they don't work. It's a bit like eating a plastic bag, you know, going to your supermarket, buying a whole load of organic vegetables, taking them home, throwing them in the bin and eating the plastic bag. There's no nourishment in it. There's no benefit to it.
So you said earlier that a lot of these bigger companies, not naming names, would acquire these smaller natural businesses.
That's the ongoing thing at the moment, yeah.
Well, I think one question I would have is, let's assume that you had a business, you were focusing on putting natural products in, you had a clear demand for it and the business started to grow to the point that one of these bigger companies would be interested in an acquisition. If that was a profitable endeavor, why on earth would you shut it down? If you're going to acquire it, why would you not grow it?
That's the $1 million question. Why do they buy up these naturals who the owners or the people who've started to have the enthusiasm to find and make natural products, beat a path to the market, sometimes have quite a good reasonable turnover, and then buy them out. And of course, the attractiveness of the buyout is so attractive to the people, because ultimately most people get in business to sell out, to walk away with a profit. So there's a sort of, I think they feel that the new owners would bring more money to it and more resources. But in fact, what happens is they actually look at it and they go, we're either going to change it significantly. So that means they usually bring in a lot of chemicals, a lot of petrochemicals and synthetic chemicals, or what they do is go, well, yeah, it is profitable, but in the scale of things the size of us, it's just a thorn in our side because it's yet another natural that's turning people's heads. Let's get rid of it. And that seems to be what I think is the sort of status of the big boys. I mean, I was approached halfway through my sort of 30 years in the industry to get involved with one of the big giants in the world. And we went through an awful lot of talks with them and such like, but they knew that I was not for selling out, and certainly not on the basis that we knew they would come in and change the formulations. And that, we parted, and that's why we've stayed very independent. We've had a couple of investors, but we one of the things that small independents like us struggle with is raising the funds to make is huge. And you kind of, you get little bits of pocket money here and there, and you make your move. And, we've found over the years that, our route to market is basically direct to the consumer, because they're the ones that's interested in how good the product is. The retailer or the middleman or the big company owners, they're not really interested in the quality of the product. They just look at, how much money can we make out of it? And that's not what I work to. I work to the fact that we want products that have a really good natural formulation, which has, it can do things for people's cells.
So do you think it's fair that a smaller business, even though it might be profitable, can never be as profitable as synthetic-based? No. Just hands down.
And the other issue with it is the fact that you kind of, a lot of natural companies over-formulate. So, I mean, I get inundated daily with, dozens of people who are reacting to even natural products because there's too many naturals in them. It's a highly skilled. This is when I met my formulator. She was, her background was in chemistry, and she really did understand the need to make a product simply. We see it in beers and things like that. Some of the nicest craft beers are lovely because they're not overmade. There's maybe half a dozen ingredients, and that's what stops them from people having an allergic reaction. But the big boys are not interested in that in any shape or form. They're only wanting mass production, how much profit is in it. I did a thing many years ago for the Daily Mail, and they did quite a big write-up on it. Unfortunately, we never sort of got them to put our name on it. But I went into one of the supermarkets and turned round all the hair shampoos, and this was like 99p up to $7.99, and they were all the exactly same ingredients, the same chemicals, the same synthetics, same petrochemicals. The only difference was the colouring they put in and the perfume. two other synthetic ingredients. And I sent this on to some writer in the Daily Mail, and she decided to do quite a big article. I think they did about a 2-page spread in it. And it's still on our website, funnily enough, actually. I've not taken it down. But they then went off to Harrods and bought some really expensive shampoos, like, nearly £50 for a shampoo. She sent them to me and said, what do you think of that? And I say, well, it's actually exactly the same formulation as the 99p one in the supermarket.
Just a different brand.
Yeah, and you get it in skincare. You get one of the biggest brands in the world at the moment, which is portrayed as being super, anti-aging or whatever accordingly. The formulation is almost identical to the 129 Nivea, and yet this product sells for over £400.
God. Well, as we go down that rabbit hole in a bit, I do want to explore, for people who aren't aware of your work, talk about your history. You say across 30 years. I want to know the details of the formulations and what got you into that and the chemical understandings. Like, why is it that people would, well, not to put you on the spot, but why would people trust you over other people in the industry?
There's two reasons. One is the fact that, obviously, if you go back to when we first started out, we were literally the only ones. The only one I was aware of was Dr. Hershker in Germany, and they've got a load of chemicals in their products now. So I don't know whether they were taken over in Germany or whatever. But what Aspire does was the fact that we kind of, my formulator at the time, she was creating these products, and people were coming back to me and saying, wow, these products are fantastic. And even today, we get inundated with people saying, I have got this medical problem, I've got rosacea, or I've got blepharitis, or I'm getting all this aging taking place. And I've been buying the best products in the world for the last 20, 30 years. And, we say, well, it's the chemicals. They're not going to do anything. And so when, she was making these products, I was inspired, and I thought, why is so many people coming to us and saying, this is the best anti-aging I've used. This is, I've had skin problems. And that inspired me to take my direction personally in a different area. And so what I started thinking, well, if this is doing these things to the skin, which is the biggest organ in the body, it's got the biggest group of cells, what could these products be doing generally for the health of people? And that took me into, it's called biogerontology, but actually it's the form of longitude of life, because we all want to live longer, we all want to live more healthier. Some people turn around and say, well, I don't want to live longer if I'm going to be geriatric. Well, that's not what, gerontology and longitude of life is about. It's about actually making you slow down the aging process so fast that you actually don't get the senescence aging taking place. This is the diseases that come as you age, because as we age, we pick up these things. So I got very interested in this and started following it probably about just over 15, 16 years ago. So I was following all the main professors in this zone. I was following the research in Harvard and Stanford in America. I actually set up some research with Birmingham University, where we've written a couple of papers and things. And my whole idea was that the chemicals that's in plants have these unique properties that can actually slow down the aging process. And in turn, if you slow down the aging process, you're slowing down the senescence of the diseases. And this is why, when people say to me on the phone, why is your business, why is your products different? It's because we brought that knowledge into it, which isn't in the beauty industry.
But when you say you have products that work because people say they do, what was the process of finding the things that worked and the things that didn't?
Trial and error.
Just years of trial and error.
Correct. So what we'd do is we'd look at, say we made a product, we'd look at what's in it and we'd say, well, let's get this benefits and that benefits and things like that. And it was interesting because when I went to Birmingham University, probably, just 12, 13 years ago, there was a scientist there who opened my eyes to a lot of things. And this is, came about because they basically said to us, fine, John, come to us with these products, but can you find out the physical, chemical and retroolic properties of these plants?
What does that mean?
Well, this is what's in a plant. So if you eat a carrot, what's in the carrot that's good for you? And it's mostly the oils. There's very little in the fibres and things like that. They do a different job eating them, but it's the oils that contain these minerals and vitamins. It's almost as if our great planet Earth is creating this in the ground, these nutrients, but it's the oils in them. And that's what we do as a manufacturer. We get the raw material people to supply us the oils that would come from those plants. So, the typical one was sort of avocado was one of the ones that was raised with the fact that, what's in this? Because I found that avocado, I look very closely at sunscreens, and I still look very closely at sunscreen, and we're about to sort of really, again, take another major leap in sunscreen. I came across incidents where there was scientists who were doing testing on SPFs and sun creams and things like the sun barriers. And one of the conclusions, besides the fact they were testing to give them an SPF rating, was they actually turned around and said, oh, wait a minute, these chemicals in these sunscreens are actually a major cause of oxidative free radicals.
Okay, sorry. What is that for those of us who don't know?
Oxidative free radicals is what attacks us.
Okay.
So, we're attacked by free radicals. Now, we have to have free radicals because we have to have a balance of them because they basically split the cells. Okay. So that they need to be around. But the trouble is there's so many chemicals that we come in contact now, it's accelerating these free radicals out of all proportion. And what's happening is these free radicals go on to attack the cells and destroy them. And there's an awful lot of science reports that says that, aging is predominantly caused by free radicals. Cancers are predominantly caused by free radicals because they interfere. And one of the interesting things about, I found with the avocado oil was the fact that it had the best properties to protect you from the main source of free radicals from the sun, UVA. Whereas UVA bypasses nearly every single sunscreen in the market, and yet it is the responsible photon which causes skin cancer and aging to cells.
And avocado blocks that?
Well, it neutralizes it. What it basically does is it doesn't block it or repel it or anything like that. What happens is when these UVAs come in, the UVA goes in and interferes with the new cells, and it creates more free radicals. So the new cells have to deal with these free radicals, and they can't. But when it's there, the avocado oil neutralizes that. And it stops that build-up of free radicals. And that's what got my interest in longitude of life because, one of the things that people think that say, oh, we're actually living longer than we did in Victorian times. Well, yes, that's because of the sewage systems and the waters, and they all got better. And so people lived long because that was the diseases. That's why, in London, they talk about, people mostly drunk gin and in France wine because the water was so contaminated. So I kind of, got interested in this because the avocado oil and these other oils that come from plants hold these type of molecules which seem to be beneficial to us. So when people are getting to their 60s and 70s and 80s, they're contracting these aging diseases. You can see it. People come to me for skin products because they want to slow down the aging process. And we find that these oils do that. So one of the studies I did with Birmingham University with the scientists there, and we had it all documented and they rubber stamped it and everything. So, is the fact that, could these oils be beneficial because can they be transdermal into the bodies? So these things that the skin is suffering from free radical damage, which, it goes through the skin and into the body, could these oils be slowing it down? Now, this is really interesting because that's the main crux of longitude of life. And one of the people who, I've watched a couple of podcasts with him, is this a billionaire guy in America who's actually
I know the one. I can't remember his name.
No.
He's like the ginger guy. Quite,
correct. Yeah. So he's reversed his aging quite dramatically. To be honest with you, you wouldn't want to live that life, or
it's extreme. I know the guy you mean.
But one of the things he pushes everything is olive oil, to consume olive oil. Now, when you look at this, it's interesting because the biggest consumers of olive oil are generally the Italians. And one of the blue areas in the world where the people live the longest and the most healthiest is in these parts of Italy where they have olive oil. But this is the really interesting factor. The olive oil has to be green olive oil. the black olive oil, and I love olives because I, sit in a bar and I'll have it, I'd prefer the black olive to taste because it tastes nicer. But actually, the ones that's got the properties is the green olive oil. And this reflects on what we do. We look very, very closely at the raw material. So when we go to supply a raw material, we turn around and say, right, the criteria is they go, oh, you probably want organic because you're a natural company. I say, well, actually, yeah, if you've got it, great, but organic doesn't actually do anything for us. It doesn't turn us on. They go, well, what do you want? We say, we want unadulterated. So when you've taken the oil out of the plant, you don't interfere with it. And secondly, we want therapeutic grade. And therapeutic grade is interesting because when we first started out 30 odd years ago, there was a lady who's very, very famous. She's totally retired now. But she was very famous in her day because she wrote a lot of the aromatherapy books, Francesca Watson. And she had this massive clinic in North London, which was for health and huge amounts of following. And she retired and she didn't sell her business, but she sold her knowledge to her son, who basically is a great supplier of our naturals. And so when we go to them, we say, right, if it's growing organically, that's great. Thank you very much. But actually, we want it unadulterated. We don't want you having interfered with it. And secondly is the fact that we want the therapeutic grade. This is the aromatherapy grade. This is where, at the moment, aromatherapy is doing things that nothing else is doing in the medicine world because they can't. It's crazy to think they can do every medical thing, but they don't. They're more a preventer. And this is that's the two criteria we want, and they're still very difficult to get.
Well, can I take you back to that point where you were talking about the scientists who wanted you to break down the properties of avocado?
Yeah,
if we look at these, I guess, like complex molecules, and you say, right, avocado can do these things that the synthetic sun creams can't.
Yeah.
Surely they can know. Like, surely you can scientifically scan it, do spectroscopy or something, and go, okay, well, now we can clearly see what it is in the avocado that does it. And you said something about retinopathy, was it?
Yeah, the retrolytic. This is the properties. We try to find out what the properties in the raw material is.
Yeah, okay.
But the beauty industry is not interested.
But why would you not be if the effect was?
I think because they're a headache to manufacture.
Right.
So we're now getting to the stage that we struggle to get certain raw materials. One of the raw materials we got for tightening skin was from a plant which became, during COVID or just after COVID, became almost you couldn't find it. And the German company who was the only supplier of it, who got it from an American company, I tracked all the way down to America. I sat up one night to 1 o'clock in the morning to be able to speak to them on the phone. And they said the plant's not being grown at the moment because it's not being distributed. So this raw material is not available. Well, the raw material suppliers were trying to get us to buy a synthetic version because they said, you can still call it this poppy seed, but it's actually man-made. And we say, well, has it got these qualities in it? No, that only comes from the plant.
But it's the same. Yeah. Is it exactly the same mixture of
it's the
stuff?
It's the same gel, but
right.
man-made molecules rather than plant-made molecules. So it's a bit like you're going into a restaurant and you're sitting down and they give you man-made vegetables, and you think they look the same, they taste the same, they cut the same, they chew the same, but it hasn't got those vitamins and minerals in it because it's not come from the earth, and they can't replicate that, the synthetics. The other thing with naturals is the fact that besides the raw materials supplying, we've got a situation where the suppliers run out very regularly because there isn't the demand for it. So the people like us in the natural world. I mean, when I first started out, literally the only people making natural product. We now have other people making lots of natural products, but the supply has got better. And I think the big boys. I was explaining this to somebody on the phone the other day. When I had my formulator working with us, I used to say to her, like you're saying to me, why do they use these synthetics? Why do they not, just do what we do? And she would say, because when she made a product, the mixing vessel would be cleaned out at the end of the day, maybe take an hour and a half to clean out the mixing vessel. The filling vessel would be cleaned out and have to be washed out and such like. She says the big boys run 24/7. So they put a lot of these chemicals in to lubricate the machines so they don't have to shut them down and clean them. And these are the chemicals that bleaches and propylene glycols and gels and things like that go into the products, because it's not there for the benefit of the consumer, it's there for the benefit of the manufacturer.
Because that goes back to the profitability element. It's like, yes,
it goes
you
back
might
to
be
the
able
profit.
to.
I mean, they will, if they're running 24/7, they're manufacturing, millions and millions of bottles of stuff. Whereas a small manufacturer, like us, with a natural base, we don't make that volume. So our machines, we can stop at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and clean them out for a couple of hours, and then they're fresh for the next products the next day. So the whole industry, to a great extent, a lot of people say, do you think it'll change an awful lot? And I say, I don't think it'll change to the extent that the big manufacturers will ever get truly into natural products, because they wouldn't be able to make the volume. But certainly people, we've noticed that, consumers are now voting with their purse, because they're going, well, I want to have a natural product. And that tends to be fair, that tends to be the older consumer. The older woman has looked in the mirror in her 50s and went, what happened? I bought all these expensive products. Look at my face. Or they may have rosacea or redness or allergies and having all kinds of problems. And they're sort of saying, well, I spent the money. What's wrong? And I'll have to say to them, well, trouble is you spent the money on things that are just synthetic chemical, are no benefit to you.
And I think the funny thing for me, if I've understood correctly, is it's synthetic chemicals that are trying to map precisely what's happening in a organic compound, because it's almost like you say, you take the avocado, you try and scan it molecularly, if that's a word, and then you go, okay, well, what are all the molecules in this thing? Get the raw ingredients, mash them all in a thing, and go, I guess this is avocado now. Maybe it will have the same properties.
It can't have the same properties.
Yeah, it makes sense to me when you say it like that. Yeah.
I mean, the whole, since moving away from London, sort of 12, 13 years ago, I live in a sort of a very farming area. And it's really interesting because, although the poor British farmer seems to be suffering an awful lot, they do try their hardest to thing. But the properties that's in the things these guys are growing is tremendous. The only problem is the fact that, and this is where the organic thing comes in, is that they do spray them with pesticides because of that. But that's not really a big issue, because when we do look at the properties in them, the process has taken a lot of those chemicals, fertilizers, away anyway. So that's not the issue. It's a bit like organic wine, because you can go into the supermarket and you can buy an organic wine, which doesn't taste that great. It's usually really expensive, but actually, if you look at it, it's got the same chemicals as the other bottles of wine, the sulfates. So it's not being organic that keeps you away from chemicals. In the wine, it's biodynamic. Well, in our business, we're almost like biodynamic principles, although we don't, grow them to those type of structure. But it's the fact that we want a really pure ingredient, and we don't want it with perfumes. We don't want it with synthetics. We don't want it with preservatives. I mean, sometimes raw materials suppliers come to us and go, "We've got this, but it's preserved with this," and we go, "No, that's a no. We're not having that." And they go, "Well, why? Everybody else does. What's wrong with you?" And we go, "Well, we've got different principles. Our customers trust us, and when the older woman comes to us and uses our product, and it clears up their redness or their blepharitis or their allergies or phenomenal anti-aging, I get a situation where women send me an email who are customers, and they go, "There's so many people commenting my skin since using your products," and it's quite fast, because what happens is these naturals act really fast. the skin, the cells in the skin and such like go, wow, that's great. And this is where I believe in the longitude of life, that these are a possibility of these going in transdermally. We've already done that in the research, and they contain these properties and go in. Sometimes we release products where it's for people who've got various issues with their muscles and their bones and arthritis, and we say put this on, and they go, well, how come that's really worked? Especially when a lot of the people who come to us with medical problems, they've went down the hospitals, they've went down the dermatologist, they've went to the doctor umpteen times, and then they come out. The one that gets me is the one that they turn around and say, there was one woman a month ago who basically said, what kind of sorcery is this? And I went, oh, what's she meaning? And when I read her, she says, because I've been everywhere for years, and suddenly I use your product, and overnight that skin problem I've got has disappeared.
And the secret is just using fully natural stuff.
It's just using fully natural products and identifying the natural product, what's in it that has those benefits. So,
but that for you is still a trial and error, or is that a science now?
It's science to us because we're looking at it. I mean, at the formulation show, I stumbled across a couple of scientists, and I think they were Canadian. And she was talking about the cellulose gel. Now, cellulose gel, I read about cellulose gel 25 years ago with a young Canadian scientist who won a big award for her research into cellulose. Cellulose gels is the gel in plant or behind the bark of a tree. That's this is
like
cellulose
sap
gel.
or aloe vera.
Yeah. So and it's it's a gel, and we use it extensively. And she was showing me properties that this really they've found that this really protects people from the sun. And so we've been selling face washes and products made of this gel, not knowing that it's got these great properties to protect you from the sun. Because you see, one of the issues.
So that was just a byproduct, like an accidental byproduct.
Yeah, we've been using it for years and not realising it has those properties.
Well,
but there's these scientists who are they're mostly coming out of the independent universities because the big boy scientists don't want to know. They don't want to research products that have got naturals because they know if they go to their their board of directors, they'll go to and say, this is a really good natural, but we'll have to totally reformulate everything.
But the thing that still rattles around in the back of my mind like a loose bolt is if the like hypothesis is you can solve a genuine medical solution with these organic compounds, you have the science down, and assuming that there's papers and scientists who understand this and they look at it and they analyze it, they do the split tests and they get the numbers. I would have thought that if something genuinely worked against lots of things that don't, the thing that genuinely worked could be pound for pound less profitable, but the servable market would just explode because it'd be the thing that actually works. So, and people love money in big corporations. Well, why would a big corporation not sit down and go, hold on a minute,
The interesting thing about this, Mark, is this is the crossroads I'm sitting on. This is the wall I'm sitting on at the moment because we're already successful. We're already making money as a business. We're getting all this feedback, which is, it's the feedback from people when they tell you that their child who suffers from eczema all their life and cries and won't go to school, and they use our products for a cup of day and say, it's cleared it up. That's worth more money than any you can make, and that's a driving force with us. But this is the sort of crossroads I'm at the moment because we are solving, our products seem to be having a tremendous effect in anything up to about 20 different skin medical problems. Now, why wouldn't you say, let's take that into pharmaceutical? Let's make it available. The doctors can sign it and all. But you're up against the barrier that the pharmaceutical industry controls so much. They don't want those products to come through. You have to depend on the consumer just saying, I'm going to buy them and try them. We're sitting here thinking, do we move this? So we've kind of, in the last 12 months, I've had this in the back of my mind for so long. The last 12 months, I've gone to different events and met people who are now consultants who were regulators in America or regulators in the EU and such like, and they went in their own as a consultancy. And I've said to them, look, we've got these natural products and they're doing this and they can do that. They're saying, you have got as a small business, a small, medium-sized business, you have got a mountain to climb. It's all very well for these big, massive drug companies who are worth, hundreds of billions, if not more. They've got the resources to do it. They don't want to do it.
The resources to go through the regulators that allow it
to spend the money. So, I said to them, I said, well, what kind of money are we looking at? And thinking, how much money we got? And they're saying, look, you could spend to get one product through the regulations. You could spend £500,000
to have one product. Registered in one country.
And although you can use that data sometimes in places like the States, and they've said that's have you got that kind of money? And I'm going, well, no, not really. We don't. There's not that kind of profit in it. They say, well, obviously you could go and raise it, and we think, well, yeah, so that's another aspect. We need to sort of look at that. But then the other question comes, they say, and you're looking at 2 years, because they've got to do all kinds of testing. It's not like me saying to, 40,000 people use this and see if it works. And they come back and say, oh, yeah, they did. This is about going in clinical trials and placebos and all this sort of stuff. There's a whole host of stuff that's got to be done.
Do you think that's overall a good thing, or is it too corrupted now?
It's made difficult for people like us to come through.
Right.
And so what happens is they say you're looking at 2 years, and then you're going to sit for 2 years to get in front of the regulators. So you're looking at a 4 to 5 year project to get your product, and that's before you even start thinking where you're going to sell it.
Why do you think it's that long?
They're making it difficult. And it's quite interesting, because these ex-regulators have been saying to me, there is a little bit of a grey area if you want to take a chance, because you kind of you could go down this route as a sort of an alternative medicine type thing. The trouble is that's being clouded, because a lot of people go, oh well, it's pseudoscience. It's sort of it's kind of it's not right. Men are particularly bad for it. I had one the other day who was saying to me, I'm under the consultant at Kingston Hospital, I've got this and they got him on this stuff that is causing his eyes to basically, the skin is peeling on the eyelids. The chemicals are too strong. And I said to him, just put our cream on and use our face wash and things like that, even for a day, samples, samples, I'll send them to you. And he comes back and says, oh, it's fantastic. But we kind of, I don't know, the consultant sort of said, you should be using this. And I said, but you've had this for years, and suddenly you find a natural works accordingly. And I just, men are particularly bad for it. Women are got more thing, and I think that's because, as I've said before, they look in the mirror and they go, well, that really expensive products I've been using for 30 years. Look at the state of my skin. I've got all kinds of redness. I've got aging going on. And the interesting thing about the oils is that the oils that come from plants have got phenomenal anti-aging benefits. As we talked about, the sort of the billionaire in America who's he's turned around saying olive oil. Well, olive oil is just one of a plant. It's just one from one plant. There's so many things, and we've become so knowledgeable about this. The data that we've built up over the last 30 years in these raw materials is incredible. And so when people come to us and they say, oh, I've had this experience with this raw material, I'll go and look and say, well, what's in that raw material, that plant, and see if we can replicate it in one of our other products, which has got the same properties. A lot of plants have the same properties in them, a lot of benefits. So, but the big boys just, there's hurdles. Mm. And then, after 4 or 5 years, you've then got to find, well, who's going to market this? Is the internet going to be strong enough for us to, yeah, possibly, maybe that's the way to go. But at the moment we're prominent in the internet anyway.
Well, AI might be a friend, right? Because
Well-
maybe GPT and Gemini is going to come along and go, if you need something that actually works, check out this.
I've always been, being somebody who's, coming up to 70s, I kind of always remember the original old movies that, the robots are going to take over.
Yeah.
And you used to
they
think...
still might, but...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, I have, I find an AI as a great friend now. I'm only just getting my head around it. I'm using it to reply to people, and and I'm thinking, that said that better than I've said it, and it's taken the key words that I would want to get across, and people understand it more.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, this is the thing. It's sort of one of the consultants we were talking to basically said that a lot of this can be done by AI now for you, but you're still going to have to go through the clinical trials in humans. It's interesting because one of the people who's, I would think, is the industry's best friend in the world is Kennedy, the health secretary in America. Now I think he's the nephew of JFK, the assassinated president. He is very anti-pharmaceutical. For two reasons. One is the fact he thinks they lie like a cheap watch, and secondly, the fact that he thinks they rip everybody off, including the government. So he's trying to change this. Again, that is a huge mountain to follow. But the interesting thing is he's taken on sunscreens in the last 6 months. He's basically said sunscreens need to be retested because they're probably not doing what they should be doing, and they could be causing even more damage, further damage. If you get somebody in place like that, then that's fantastic because you've got a powerful person over there accordingly. But then you have to then think about a small, medium-sized enterprise like us can produce a really high-quality product, but can it scale up? That's the question. Can we scale it up in manufacturing?
And would you want to?
Well, it's one of those things that you kind of even when you get coming up to your 70, you still are. If you've been ambitious all your life, you continue that bug is there. It's whether or not you have the energy for it anymore. Because my day basically is taken up from sort of 8:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night, answering people's emails with problems. And
you still do that personally? Yeah.
I still do that personally, and somebody the other night said to me, "You should get AI to do that," and I say, "Well, maybe that's what I should be doing is adapting into an AI situation." But people have so many. The first thing I want to know from a person who comes to me with a problem or wants anti-aging is, what are you using? That's what I want to know. And they come back and they go, "I'm using this, and this," and they say, "Right. This is what's in them," because sometimes you go out and say you're just using a load of chemicals, and they'll go, "Oh, you'd say that," but then I get the formulation, the products they're using. I highlight what they are. They're in a state of shock, especially if they're on the phone. You can just see them going, "Oh my goodness."
Well, what are if someone's listening to this going, what are the things that are alarm bells?
One the other day was the woman was using products that had bleach in it.
Literal bleach.
Bleach, yep, the chemical.
And that's on the
bleach.
label?
Yep, on the back label, but people don't know it. The drain cleaner.
I'm assuming it doesn't say drain cleaner on the label.
The chemical is what's used in drain cleaner. Antifreeze that's used in car radiators and also as brake fluid in cars. Now, if you go into a garage workshop and you see their big 5 litres of antifreeze because they buy it in bulk, it comes with skull and crossbones and wash off skin immediately. And that's one of the main ingredients used, even in some of the top natural ranges, use this propylene glycol, which is antifreeze.
So that... I obviously come into a lot of these conversations and I'm an idiot in many respects because I'm trying to learn, right? It sounds very hard for someone like me to believe that a skincare company, one of the big teams that has products that millions of people use, it's very hard for me to believe that they would put antifreeze and drain cleaner
it's there in the back label. And people used to say to me, I remember we were we once made some products for a company which distributed them through sort of affiliate agents, and their main business was the magnets that you'd wore, but they wanted to go into using natural product and promoting them such like. And they took us all to the south of France for a big event. These agents were coming from Australia and Canada and all this sort of thing, and we really upset the managing director of the company because he wanted to do a talk with these 50 people, these top agents, and they all came to me and my partner's talk in another part of the hotel. They didn't come to his talk because they wanted to know about the chemicals and stuff. And we were talking about, and then they took us on a trip up to St. Paul de Vence, and up in St. Paul de Vence, there's an awful lot of the French perfume people, and they have products on their shelves. And one of the ladies said to me, "You can always tell it's you and Karen because you pick something up and you don't look at the front label, you look at the back label, and nobody does." And the whole idea of the ingredients at the back is so people can see what they're using. But people don't know because, you know, they're in Latin or they're in chemical, you know.
And I'm assuming that's done on purpose to like obfuscate the source. Because, like, for example, if I was looking on the back of the label, it's not going to say drain cleaner, it's not going to say antifreeze.
But if it did, you wouldn't buy it, would you?
But what are the chemicals? Like, what comes to mind for you when you... Well,
I mean, this is it. You can identify. You turn the product around and you look at the chemicals like propylene glycol, and if you see that, then you can pretty well be sure that if they're putting that in, that's a big portion of the formulation. And then you look at the other ingredients in it, and they hide a lot of products like, you know, bleach. You know, why would you want to put bleach in a product? Well, it's to alter the pH. They say. Well, we don't need to use bleach to alter our pH. So why do you need to?
Is bleach is acidic or alkaline, is it?
It's acidic.
So the idea is you would make a compound that was really alkaline, and then you'd need to add bleach to change the pH so it's neutral again.
That's what they're saying. But, you know, why do you need to do it? Why do you need to have it when people... The biggest one that was in the early days when we first started out was the fact that there was I think it was Organic Living, did a big article, and they ran it for many editions, on parabens being linked with breast cancer.
And what are parabens, sorry?
Parabens, they preserve the product.
Okay.
They are the very best preservative.
So is it like a glue that holds stuff together, is it?
No, it kills the bacteria.
Okay.
So they use it in drugs.
Okay.
They use it in personal care products, skin care products. It's everywhere. You see it in food. It's everywhere. And these people did an article from some science, I think it was a university, who said, you know, the majority, I think in America, the majority of people who got breast cancer, and about 80% in the UK who got breast, they found the paraben preservative in the cancer cell.
Jesus. What? So they actually pulled the cancer cell apart, stick a microscope under it, and they see that.
Yeah, whatever I don't know what exactly they do, but that was the paper that was wrote, was the fact that they found. Now they couldn't say it caused cancer because they don't know.
I do remember.
Do you remember
a hype around it? I didn't really understand the depth of it.
It was an interesting. Now my formulator at the time was formulating products without parabens, and that was one of the key things we spoke about, was that we don't use parabens. And people go, well, what's wrong with parabens? And you know, I said to her, you know, why do they use it? Say, well, it's a great preservative. They don't have to think twice, and they can put lots in.
It's probably cheap as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, probably if it's made in a volume, it will be probably significantly cheap. But it's more the fact that you kind of have to do less testing. Because it's automatic that it'll pass all its micro testing and things like that. The paraben kills everything off, and that was the sort of in the very early days, and this was, you know, what we spoke about accordingly. And the consumer changed the marketplace, because one of the things I always remember women talking about was, they say that everybody knows somebody who's had breast cancer. And that was very true. I think that was very, very true. Now it's skin cancer, but it's now it was back then it was breast cancer, and the kind of the consumer then started to avoid products with parabens because there was so much publicity about it. I think the Daily Mail ran an article. I think the woman who wrote the one about the shampoo, she wrote, and I can't remember her name, but she wrote an article about it. So it became a big topic. Now you see everybody walking about at consumer shows with, you know, a T-shirt saying no parabens. It's only 1% of the formulation. So, you know, all the other chemicals accordingly. And it kind of, with the paraben, because we hadn't done it from day one, we kind of showed that we were concerned with the thing. And if you make a product and they say you can only preserve it, there's no other preservatives in the world that will preserve that. You've got to use parabens. What choice have you got? You've no choice whatsoever. If you want something to be in a shelf and not grow fungal and grow bacteria, you've got to use parabens. But I used to say to people, well, there is. Why are you not using the alternatives? And they go, oh, it's too difficult. You've got to reformulate, you've got to retest, you've got to do all the parabens is, everywhere. You can take it anywhere in the world. And as if
so it's like a standardization in a way.
I used to think that's really bad, because you should be constantly looking. Like, we changed our preservative system probably 5-6 years ago, because there was a better natural one came out.
Which was?
It's a combination of 7 different things at very tiny amounts, but basically it's a sort of, it replaced the phenoxyethanol, which was not as bad as parabens, but it had you could have an allergic reaction to it, about 1 in every 10,000 people, something like that. But the minute we found an alternative, we reformulated everything, retested everything. We went out our way to make sure that we constantly were making products that have, the least impact, not only on people, but the environment. I find it fascinating in the industry. That is not a criteria. That is not. I'll give you an example of this. When we first started out many, many years ago, a couple of girls approached us and said, and I won't give any names, but they were the biggest distributor of masks, and these masks were in chemists, and you'd pay £1 for a sachet, and it was all the mask in somebody's face and the cucumbers and carrots and whatever else. So it was all it's natural. And these 2 girls came to us and said, would you be able to reformulate it, because we have got a lot of chemicals in it. We need to sort of, and we said, of course. And we went away and we said, what kind of volume? And they said that, and we went, oh my goodness.
A lot of orders.
This is huge. Yeah. I mean, their warehouse was like 500 square feet, and it's sold all over the world. And I went to my science team and they said, right, the new factory we're in is not really suitable. So what you need to do is portion off part of the factory and have extractors and all this sort of stuff, so that mud, if you like, that clay didn't go airbound into the other products. So we were, thinking, we need to spend a lot of money and do it, so it was fine, but the volume was great. So I thought, here we go. This is what we set up for, being, a big manufacturer, accordingly, and, a big contract. And then there was a board meeting with the 2 girls who were fairly senior buyers, and they obviously were thinking, we want to be as natural as possible. And we had this board meeting, and the sales director of this company basically turned around and said, has anybody got any idea how we tell their customers that we've been conning them by selling a supposedly natural mask, which wasn't natural, but now it's natural? And of course, even I went, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you've got this image of it being natural, and it's not natural. It's got some natural muds in it and such like, and it just and we used to use the clay mask for our own use, because we used to supply a lot of salons at one time before we went consumer only, and they all wanted this clay mask. And then the raw material supplier, I said to the raw material supplier one day, I said, can I just ask you, when we get this mask in, when we get this clay in, how have you got rid of all the bacteria spores in it? Because it's basically coming from the ground, it's mud. We hit it with radiation. And I went, oh. And it was quite funny, because my chief formulator basically said, well, we could change the name of our brand to Glow in the Dark Cosmetics.
I'm assuming that none of that radiation would sit in the product.
We don't know. Yeah. How do you know?
Well, I guess it goes back to what you said about organic compounds, because radiation would naturally denature organic compounds, wouldn't it? If you go and you spank something with a bunch of gamma, it's going to break apart all of.
It's going to destroy all the benefits. So these are the sort of things that we look at, but most manufacturers don't. And even some of the newer natural people who are making products, they are not as focused on this. I'm intensely focused on it because of my longitude life research. And people say to me, why did you get into longitude? And I say, it's probably quite selfish. because as I was growing older, I didn't want to contract the aging diseases and have the aging problems. So I've been fascinated by this longitude. And it's actually this year is really fascinating because the big brands have now coming out saying, oh, we're a longitude of life product. And I go, well, where in the formulation is that?
Yeah. The standard.
They've just taken this and went boom. Yeah. It's a bit like having a 12-cylinder 6-litre engine and going, oh, it's an EV. It's not an EV. Just because you put one electric motor on it, you still get the big end. And this is, at the end, the industry, they're not interested. The formulators. I went to a manufacturer about a year ago, state of the art, almost brand new. Beautiful, beautiful factory. Went into their labs, and they probably had about 8 different cosmetic scientists in there formulating, and they make things for all kinds of people, mostly all synthetics. So I couldn't really deal with them very much. But I went in and spent a couple of hours with the lab, with the scientists in there. I said to him, "Do you ever look at the properties that's in these naturals?" No. If it comes out as a marketing thing, oh, let's put this natural ingredient in it because it's it's got this publicity, but it's a bit like being a vegan or a vegetarian and sitting with a plate of vegetables, and then somebody comes along and covers it in beef dripping. That's what they're doing with the formulations. They're taking a few naturals, which are maybe 1 or 2%, 3, 4, 5%, whatever accordingly, and they're just
sticking a bunch of drain fluid in it.
Yeah,
a bunch of drain cleaner in it. Oh, it's fascinating to understand. I think a lot of people would love to know, how the process for you works. Like when you make your stuff, how does it literally work?
Well, first of all, it tends to sort of, the first thing that triggers me is when you get things from Harvard, where they've stopped mice aging. Or they've given mice back their eyesight that's been blind, or they've taken an old mouse and make it young. So you go, what's that? What's going on there? And yes, they are doing things which are, outside the box accordingly. But an awful lot of it is based on stopping this free radical damage. And the free radical damage, if you can stop that, you will certainly slow down the aging process dramatically. You will stop the senescence diseases, which are triggered with it. The other thing that a lot of plant materials do is anti-inflammatory. When people, have heart disease and kidney disease and gallstones and various other things, soreness in their limbs and their aches and pains and such like as they get older, it's inflammation. That's the inflammation is the cause of heart disease to a great extent, because it's a bit like if you cut yourself and you don't look after it, it gets inflamed, and the body then takes ages, days, if not weeks, to be able to repair it. One of the things with these natural ingredients is they're all anti-inflammatory. So you're actually, from day one, you're putting these anti-inflammatory things in your body or on your skin, and they're there. So if you get something happening, it's a bit like on our website, there's a fascinating page, and it's one of our oils, and the woman who, there's pictures on it, there's about 30 pictures on it. Her husband, she was a user of our products. Her husband was found to have a major tumour in his brain, and they said to him, right, what we'll do is we can go in and cut it out, and 50-50, but it's better than what you are, because if you stay, you are, your sort of thing. He said, that's fine. So they said, the only trouble is we have to cut from the front of the forehead right to the back. We'll shave all your hair, and we'll cut from here, and we have to peel it back, break the skull, and go in and think. And anybody would turn around and say, well, if it's got to be done, it's got to be done. Anyway, and they said, you're going to be a bit Frankenstein looking, because going to have this big, you not have any hair and such like, and you're going to have this big massive scar. It's going to be quite frightening. And he was going, I could wear a hat and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, his wife used our oils and found they were great for anti-aging and all this sort of stuff. And she'd heard that we talked about putting it on cuts and things like that. And he actually started his life off as a men's shave oil. But, if you cut yourself, it repairs. Well, she went in every day into the hospital, and she massaged this oil on his head. After a couple of days, once the stitching was completely thinged up, and she massaged this oil on, 2-3 times a day, whatever, when she was visiting. But she took photos. So when you see him in the first photo, he is absolutely black and blue. Everything's black and blue.
And people listening can see these on the...
Yeah, you can see them on the page, because she sent them all to us. We were really surprised. And you can see the progress over, maybe a couple of months, until the last couple of pictures, there's no scar.
What do you mean, no scar? There must be
no scar whatsoever. And that's the healing property of plants. And that just shows you how... So it went in... I don't ask me how it did it. I presume it's because it stopped the free radicals. It blocked out the oxygen, which was going to cause free radicals. It was anti-inflammatory. It was antibacterial. It's just the natural way of healing.
I imagine you can understand from a lot of people's perspectives listening to that, they would find that very hard to believe. So where do they go? Like, tell people... Because whilst we're here, I think with everything you've said and your experience and the years you've spent in this industry, maybe talk a little bit about, like, what is your company? How can people find out more about what you've built?
The main company is called Essentially Yours, but our brand is called Natural Element Skincare. And that's, you can get it online accordingly. And we basically send people samples and things like that. And say, because people come to us and go, oh, you're not the big brand name, are you? How come I've never heard of you? That used to frustrate me like anything at the professional beauty shows when we used to sell to salons. The salon owner would come up and spend £150 buying our products, and then go over to one of the big brands and buy 5,000 to use in the treatment rooms. It's got the name, you haven't. So our name is Natural Element. And how that name came about was when I met my formulator in her little factory and that she had before we tied up with her. In her laboratory room, she had products along the shelves in little bottles, and some of them were marked Natural Elements and some of them were marked other things. And I said, what's the difference between that there and those ones saying Natural Elements? She says, well, they're only made using natural ingredients. The other ones are a mixture. And I went, that's the brand name, Natural Elements. And I just, that's been us accordingly. And to a great extent, we're vegan and vegetarian and halal. People come to us and say, yeah, but automatically, because plants don't have this problem. There's not, we don't bring animal ingredients in. We don't bring synthetic chemicals in. So we don't bring in alcohols or anything like that. So it ticks every box, even down to the packaging. When we were getting packaging, it took us ages to find the right packaging. We found a company who would supply us with bottles that came from recycled and recyclable again. And even down to the label. The label is food grade ink that's used in the label. And the paper's biodegradable and everything. So, and the other thing that I was involved with a company called WaterSense, and 20 years ago. Now, WaterSense was a charity in Scotland where they were examining the chemicals that were going into the lochs and lakes and rivers and such like, and it got closed down because when I think the French company took over Scottish Water, they decided we're not throwing money at this. But it was identifying just how much the impact of hair shampoos and shower gels, the chemicals in them, going down the drain were going into the water supply, and the Victorian water supply doesn't take it out. Because it's not designed to take it out. So these chemicals exist.
And they compound and get increased.
Yeah. And I remember watching a few years ago when there was that big outcry, and it was on sort of the BBC News and such like, where there was the process, the people who were processing sewage had leaked it into rivers and it was running into the sea. And they interviewed this professor from one of the universities on a beach. And basically, they said to him, all because you think, oh, it's horrible, all the sewage going into the sea. He says, that's not the problem. He says, that is biodegradable. It all breaks up. The salt kills off the thing. It's fine. It's all the chemicals that's coming through. And if you think, I remember when WaterSense, we did this, it was something like 200 billion of chemicals, or 200 billion in weight of chemicals that were going into the water supply every year.
Jeez.
And the interesting thing is, it's kind of like, people go, we used to in the early days, everything we make we can sell, so we never have any excess stock, and people used to say, well, do you in your factory, do you have a tanker come along and takes away the waste? I said, well, we've never got any waste, so that's everything's used, and they said, oh, and I used to say, well, is that what your business is running? And they say, oh yeah, we have to go to these places and we have to take the byproduct and take it in a tanker and take it away, and they have to pay. And I go, but where does it go? Do you put it in a rocket to the moon? No, it goes into the water supply. But because they're paying, they can do it. And it's far better to be a manufacturer who doesn't have those impacts accordingly. Just make enough that can actually that you can sell.
Sounds like a good way to run a business. So I've got to ask you, my last question is going to be, where do you want to see this go for the consumer? What do you want for the future of this industry?
I would like to see more respect of what people are expecting. So if they're buying an anti-aging product or they're buying a medical product for their particular, I'd like to see it working, because it's somewhere between 1% and 3% of a medical product works. It's certainly probably even lower than that in anti-aging, whereas we're 80-90%. And I'd like to see the industry change, but it may take me getting off the fence, getting off the wall, and pushing this into pharmaceutical. It may take that to do it. We certainly pioneered the natural world in the early days, because these cosmetic scientists used to phone me up, and we used to give the information out freely, and they'd say, well, what should we use and what should we preserve with, and do you have any data, and etc. And we would give all this out, basically creating our own competitors. But the industry is very small in the natural world. I'm interested because I think there's a lot more of benefit to longitude of life. I'd like to. I have already formulated products that can be transdermal, that could go into this, but somebody has to come along and tell us how we sell that to the public.
Do you think there's a world where all of the natural independent businesses form an alliance, and you all put your heads together and you go?
It would be nice to think that we do, and there isn't one. So it would be nice to think that would be but the big brands, out of France and Paris and wherever, they dominate. They dominate them. So they have the people working for them. They have the marketing expertise,
the lobbyists, the control.
They have all this going. Whereas we're the only thing we've got going is the internet, and people beat a path to our door and go, oh, that's great, and then they tell their family and friends, and we can expand that way. And I think it'll be like the paraben issue. I think it was something like 50% of the consumers avoided products with parabens, and that changed the industry, because an awful lot of people dropped. A lot of the big brands still use them, but an awful lot of the industry stopped using them. So people voting with their feet, with their purse. The bigger we get, the more we can do. And I think this is an important factor, that it's not, when you buy a product from us, it's not just about that product working for you. You're actually giving us a little bit of profit to do other things.
Well, I have to say on that note, thank you so much for your time today. It's
fascinating
to learn about this. John, pleasure.
Cheers, thank you.
Love that.
Well.